This girl was raised by stray dogs, and what happened to her is absolutely shocking. Have you ever wondered how you would have turned out if you weren't raised the way that you were? I remember seeing this case on TV at a really young age, and me and my sister being so disturbed by it. Oksana Malaya was born in 1983 in Ukraine. She was a completely normal child when she was born. However, unfortunately for her, she would not be lucky enough to have a normal childhood. When she was 3 years old, her dad's alcoholism reportedly spiraled out of control. It's reported that her parents would lock her out of the house with stray dogs. She was extremely neglected by those who should have been taking care of her. As a result, when she was found by authorities at the age of 7, she was completely unrecognizable. She couldn't walk properly and crawled on all fours. She barked at people and lacked even basic social skills. She mimicked the dogs that she was surrounded with and even groomed herself like them and slept on the floor alongside them. When she was finally discovered by social services, they obviously removed her from where she was living. She was taken from her parents' custody. She was placed in foster care, but obviously so much damage had been done in her early, most impressionable years. She was put through therapy, and staff tried to undo all of the harm that was caused to her at such a young age. Now, she actually ended up doing quite well despite all the years of neglect. She learned to speak fluently, but it's believed that she still struggles with learning to some degree. It's reported that she's now in her 40s and has a job working on a farm. She wishes to be treated like a normal person and says that one of her wishes is to eventually find her biological mother.
Would you put a 13-foot-long python in your mouth? Now, what if it was the difference between life and death? Because that's exactly what one man, Ben Nyambe from Kenya, had to do in the month of April 2009 while tending to his crops on a farm that he managed for the last 10 years. He was doing what he did every weekend, walking the farmlands, checking over everything, making sure it was all going according to plan, when he stepped on something spongy. Almost immediately, his leg became entangled in the body of a 13-foot-long python. It then pulled Ben to the ground and began wrapping itself around his entire body. Now, pythons are known to kill and eat goats, sheep, and even kangaroo. So Ben likely seemed like not much more of a challenge to this python as it pinned his left arm to his torso and began constricting him, squeezing him extremely hard. Now, the only thing Ben could do at this point to somehow fight back was to bite this python, and that's exactly what he did. He sank its teeth into its tail as hard as he could, but this only made the python start moving and dragging his body along with it towards a nearby tree. Now, when they got to this tree, understand Ben, he's been working hard labor on this farm for the past decade. He is by no means a weak man, and with his one free arm, he wraps it around the trunk of this tree and holds on for dear life so that he cannot continue being dragged by this ginormous python. He would go on to hold on to this tree trunk for nearly an hour before eventually he just couldn't hold on anymore. His grip weakened, and the python pulled him free. So then the python drags him to an even larger tree not far from this one and actually drags his body up, holding his torso in the middle of its body, drags him up 10 feet high into the branches of this tree. And so as they're up there, it's likely believed that the python thought this prey has been sufficiently weakened, and now it's time to unhinge its jaw, which it did. It unhinges it, and it's hanging, which is a terrifying sight, I'm sure, for Ben. And now it plans to bite him and consume him whole. And so as Ben sees it preparing to do this, he has to think quick and uses all his might, all his will to survive to get his other arm free, and he does. And then he rips off his t-shirt and wraps it as fast as he can around the head and face of this huge python, making it not only unable to see Ben, but to bite Ben and attack him. So as Ben is holding this shirt tightly around this python's head, he uses his other free hand to reach down in his pocket and pull free his cell phone, where he calls for help. Not long after that call, not only police but villagers also, who heard news of this, come running down to this tree all at once to help Ben. And what they do is they get a rope and throw it up there to him, which he grabs and catches and wraps around the body of this python. And so now 2 police officers on the bottom begin yanking this rope as hard as they can until finally they yank this python down out of this tree, taking Ben along with it, and they both come crashing to the ground. Once they're on the ground, police and villagers all put their hands on this python and pull with all their might until finally they unwrap it from Ben's body and save Ben. This attack in total lasted roughly 3 hours, and the python was caged shortly after until the following morning, where rangers returned to the preserve to further examine this python and just get a better look at him, only to find that this cage was empty, and somehow the python had escaped, and it was never caught.
This is all the news you're not going to see on TV today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. People are now officially wanting to send a flat earther to space to prove them wrong once and for all. So basically, this guy wants to send a flat earther to space so they can prove to all the other flat earthers that the earth is not flat. And right now, currently, that costs $250,000 to secure a seat on this flight. So this guy started a GoFundMe and it only made $345, so it failed. Scientists have now developed a new concrete that could actually turn your entire house into a giant battery. Okay. So they're saying that whenever they combined water, cement, and carbon black, they created a supercapacitor that's capable of quick charge and discharge cycles. For anybody that hasn't heard about this, the pineapple Pepsi just returned exclusively to Little Caesars if you want to go get it. I guess they're starting to sell it on June 17th. This Colombian city planted 2.5 million different plants and 880,000 trees, and it cooled the city by 2 degrees Celsius. This is crazy. China just officially announced a dozen different flying taxis for its futuristic fleet. Basically, this is what they look like, and they're hoping to use it as taxis soon. So I guess I'll keep you updated. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
This is one of the most terrifying cases of kids unaliving kids. 2 10-year-old boys that kidnapped and brutally unalived a 2-year-old boy. In February 1993, 2-year-old James Bulger was at the mall with his mom when he vanished in the matter of minutes. His mother, Denise, dropped her toddler's hand for only a few seconds so she'd be able to pay for an item. Obviously, she's frantic. Other nearby shoppers are helping her look for her toddler. The media, the police are called. We're hoping that maybe James was just playing hide or seek or something, but as the hours and hours passed, it became less likely. So they checked the mall's security footage, which showed little 2-year-old James by his mom's side and then lured out of the mall by strangers, all within 4 minutes. And the 2 strangers that were guiding little James out of the mall were 2 children themselves. Those grainy images were released to the public to try and identify them, but at this point they truly believed that these 2 boys must have been trying to find James's mom. They assumed that these children saw James lost and were trying to help, but tragically they were wrong. Because 2 days later, little James's body was found 3 miles away on train tracks. Honestly, James's body was in such a terrible condition, it's hard to stomach. So if you need to skip ahead a couple seconds, I don't blame you. James's body had 42 injuries, 10 in which were skull fractures. He had been SA'd, there was paint in his eyes, batteries in his mouth, and then after he was beaten to death, they put the 2-year-old's body on the train tracks and a train drove by and severed his body in half. This is one of the most gruesome and heinous acts, and it's shocking to learn that it was committed by children. A local woman was able to identify the 2 boys that were with James. She said that they were troublemakers and were at the mall that day. So police brought these 2 baby-faced 10-year-old boys into questioning, Robert Thompson and John Venables. Knowing how brutal this crime was and that these were the faces of the ones responsible, it's shocking. It's evil. The boys started to kind of confess, but mostly just blaming each other. And then even more shocking, they confessed that this was something they had planned. These 2 10-year-old boys went to the mall that day knowing that they wanted to kidnap and unalive a little boy. Like what? They both went to trial. Robert Thompson showed no emotion and no remorse. They were both found guilty, but both released after serving only 8 years with new identities so they could live normal lives. It's sick, and devastating, and I can't even begin to imagine what James's mother feels knowing that. Robert has never reoffended that we know of, but John Venables has been in and out of prison many times over the years for many crimes, including having child SA photos on his computer of children as young as 2 years old. He's been released again as recently as December 2023, which wasn't even that long ago, with his fourth new identity because he reportedly gets drunk and reveals his true identity and kind of brags about what he's done. Personally, I feel like if he wants people to know what a sick, evil bastard he is, I say let him.
If you have not heard about everything that's on a recall right now, you're going to want to watch this video because I'm going to tell you everything that's under a recall in 60 seconds. So starting off strong, the FDA has issued a recall update for the cheese products at the highest risk level. So this extension is including nearly 2 million pounds of Grande cheese, and here's all the products if you want to pause and read. They're saying that these cheese products were distributed to all these states if you want to look at that too. And then the FDA and the CDC are continuing to investigate the salmonella outbreak that's likely tied to cucumbers. They're saying that these recalled cucumbers were grown in Florida and shipped to 14 states between May the 17th and the 21st. Then here's the current map of the salmonella outbreak that's linked to cucumbers by the state. The FDA has also issued a sunscreen recall that has prompted a nationwide warning. This recall is based off of the skincare company called Suntegrity. And basically it's like a sunscreen foundation, and these are all the shades that are recalled. There's also nearly 30,000 pounds of cookie dough that's under a recall. They're saying that these products were sold at Costco, Sam's Club, and Panera, and a few others. And then they were shipped to all of these states if you want to pause and read. And these are the products that are under a recall for this one. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
After a couple went missing in Tenerife, dismembered body parts have been found. Jeanette Gaston and her husband, Mark Francis, were originally from Belgium. They moved to Tenerife in search of a better life. As many older couples do, they wanted to get away to a place where they could enjoy their time together. However, tragedy struck on the 24th of April when they were reported missing. Recently, though, there was a discovery, and not a positive one. 66-year-old Janet's body washed up on the coast of Araco. Alarmingly, her death was no accident. She was found dismembered with a bag over her head. Authorities determined that her death was a violent one. Now, as of yet, Janet's husband Mark remains missing. It has recently been reported that 3 males have been arrested over the discovery. 2 of the men were arrested in Belgium and the other was arrested in Tenerife. Strangely, a local court has agreed for any progress on the case to remain secret.
This teacher had with her 15-year-old student. It was the year 2003, and Karen Louise Ellis was a 36-year-old mother of 3 living in Melbourne, Australia with her husband Stephen. She was a PE teacher at her local high school, and her husband would have to travel a lot for work, which meant that she would often be left home alone with the children. To the outside world, Karen's life seemed perfect. However, she claims that things weren't perfect and that she was actually very lonely. She didn't like that her husband had to travel so much for work, she felt neglected, and she was seeking some type of attention. Unfortunately, she decided that the person that was going to give her this affection and this type of attention was her 15-year-old student Ben. Ben was one of her PE students, and the 2 of them would spend a lot of time together on the basketball courts. Ben would make some flirtatious comments towards Karen, and Karen enjoyed the attention. Now, it's not uncommon for students to have a crush on their teachers. Like, it's somewhat normal, but it's what those teachers do with that attention and with those crushes that matters. Instead of putting a stop to this flirting, Karen flirted back. Got to the point where Karen was actually looking forward to go to work, not because she enjoyed teaching or wanted to do her job, but because she looked forward to seeing Ben. She said that Ben wasn't like other 15-year-old boys, that he wasn't on his skateboard, he wasn't giggling, he wasn't acting stupid, that he was actually very mature for his age, and that sometimes he was even more mature than she was. At first, they were only flirting with each other, but then things escalated. One day, while they were on the basketball courts, Ben leaned in for a kiss, and Karen accepted. From there, the 2 of them would meet at the basketball courts, drive over to Karen's home, and then there they would have According to phone records, Karen sent Ben almost 500 text messages and the two of them exchanged about 123 voice messages. So this was very intense. This went on for the next 6 weeks until they were finally caught. Now, the way that they were caught was that one day while they were doing their usual routine of meeting on the basketball courts and then heading over to Karen's home, Ben's mother actually spotted them leaving. And she said that this didn't look like a teacher doing a favor by driving her student home, that they looked like they were husband and wife. The whole situation just felt off, so Ben's mom decided to call the police and report Karen's abuse. Karen was taken into police custody, and what she told police was shocking. Okay, go to part 2.
The Strangers was based on a true story, and since the new movie is coming out today, let's do a review and recap of what happened in the first one, plus what it's based on. For those who don't know, The Strangers follows a home invasion type of story, and it's based off of events such as the Manson family murders and various homicides that happened in the California area. It's also loosely based on a lot of home invasions and break-ins that happened in the writer's area when he was a child. The very basic plot of the movie is you have a couple who's kind of going through a rough patch staying in this house overnight. And these masked people come out of nowhere and just start taunting them one by one, trying to stab them, hurt them, etc. We see 3 masked villains over the course of the movie and they are not letting up. And it's revealed at the very end that their whole motivation for doing this was just because they were home. And that is the lamest reason ever for someone to do anything. Like, my biggest gripe with this movie is when I tell people that I don't really like it, people say, oh, you just didn't understand it. And it's like, no, I understand it. I just don't think Happy Meal Scarecrow looks scary to me. That's basically all you need to know. It's a home invasion movie where the motivation for the home invasion is just because they wanted to do it, which is not that deep to me. And I'm excited to go see the new one because we already know going into it that these people don't really have a motivation for their crimes. So who knows, maybe they'll get more creative with it, and if they don't, what was the point of remaking it in the first place?
This is everything that happened on the news today, but it's going to be simplified in 60 seconds. The OceanGate co-founder is now organizing a trip to a 663 feet deep unexplored sinkhole in the Bahamas. Okay. A cyber attack shut down auto dealerships across the US. Basically, they're saying that their software was hacked, but it prevented around 15,000 different sales from being made. So that's crazy. We will soon be able to witness one of the rarest space events that the world will ever see. Basically, it's an asteroid that's going to be passing by Earth in the year 2029, and it's going to be 32,000 kilometers away from Earth's surface, which is closer to our planet than some of our satellites. A 90s fashion ad predicting what the future would look like leaves people shocked to how wrong they were. This is what the ad said. You can pause and read. This is crazy. This new chart is now showing how far you can drive your car when it's on empty. This one's the first list, and then this one's the second list. For everybody that's been waiting on this, the strawberry full moon is literally happening tonight, and we're gonna live stream the entire thing, so make sure you come. If you wanna make sure you don't miss it, make sure you go to my TikTok page and you click the live event so you can register to watch it with us. I give you these news roundups every day, so make sure you add me and come back to me tomorrow.
Danny Masterson was nearly victimized at his brand new prison yard. This is according to a news article update that has information coming from a source directly inside that prison. They say not only is Danny Masterson living a sweet life, playing pickleball and basketball every day, working out, playing video games, and watching movies and TV shows on his prison-issued electronic tablet, he also eats up to $300 of canteen snacks and candy every month because he doesn't like the food they serve there. The source also says when Danny first got there, several inmates on that cell block tried to victimize him, but some other inmates stepped in and stopped it before anything happened. And nowadays, Danny is not shy one bit because he has a clique around him of friends, if you want to call them that, who make sure nobody bothers him. You can call them friends, but it sounds to me like somebody got paid something somehow. Lastly, the source tells this news article that Danny has one of the sweetest jobs in the entire prison yard. He is the errand boy for the prison guards. And he runs around and does favors, delivers documents, medical permission slips to all the inmates and the guards in other cell blocks all day long. In June of 2021, 28-year-old Georgia Lori and her twin sister Melissa were on vacation in Mexico, taking a riverboat tour nearby a scenic and beautiful lagoon when they asked their tour guide a fatal question. Is it safe to swim in this water? The guide, only known as Richie, insisted that it was. But what these twins didn't know is that their tour guide was a fraud. a fraud who rounded up tourists for cheap boat rides to undercut the federally approved experts who knew the area and the waters. Experts who knew that they were currently heading into the most crocodile-inhabited part of this lagoon right in the middle of hatching season. Richie had no idea. And so as Melissa and Georgia dive into the water, they notice a large log kind of floating towards them. But seconds later, Melissa realizes this log has eyes, and it was in fact a giant crocodile closing in on them. So at this point, they both begin swimming frantically towards the shore. And just as Melissa is about to make it there, extending her hand to a third passenger who's also on this boat tour for help, this massive crocodile bites down on her other hand and yanks her under the water in the blink of an eye. The crocodile then begins the death roll with Melissa in its jaws as her twin sister Georgia watched in horror from the shore. But suddenly, the croc let her go, leaving her body floating in the lagoon. So at this point, Georgia dives into the water to retrieve her sister's body and save her. She is not leaving without her. Just as she reaches her sister's body, she sees this monstrous crocodile heading directly towards the both of them once again. So it reaches them and clamps down its jaws around Melissa's leg this time. And as it does, Georgia begins punching this crocodile as hard as she can right in its snout, and finally causes the crocodile to let go of Melissa and swim away. But then it circled around a third time now, sank its large teeth into Melissa's abdomen now, so hard that it punctured through her stomach and other organs. But Georgia, determined to save her sister, just keeps punching this crocodile the entire time as hard as she can, and she's punching, and then just like that, her fist gets caught in the mouth of this crocodile because it has let go of Melissa and caught her fist in its jaws, breaking Georgia's wrist in the process. And so this does not deter Georgia, and she gets her free hand and begins punching it as hard as she can with this hand now, throwing haymakers, until finally the croc gives up on the attack and disappears back into the lagoon. She then pulls her twin back onto the boat, where they eventually make it to help at a hospital. Georgia was treated for several deep lacerations into the palm of her hand from this croc's teeth, and also her broken wrist from when it caught it. Melissa was not so lucky. She was put into a medically induced coma for days due to her wounds becoming infected and developing sepsis. Fortunately, Melissa went on to wake up from this coma and make a full recovery. And the bond between these two twins has never been stronger.
I felt like it was kind of warm juice. It was like room temperature, and it didn't stick to my face right away. It didn't burn right away. So I just thought I had just been pranked.
In April of 2021, 21-year-old college student Nafia Ikram was heading up her driveway into her home after a long shift working as a pharmacy technician. But little did she know, there were 3 men in a red car parked just outside of her house, watching her every move, and their intentions for her would become a living nightmare. As seen here in the home security footage of her own home where she lived at with her parents, she was heading up the driveway when this man exited that red car and ran up behind her with a bucket full of battery acid and splashed it right in her face. Afterwards, the man immediately fled back to the car, and the car fled the scene, and now Nafia is just kind of aimlessly wandering back down her driveway. She can't see at all. All she knows is that there is a extreme burning sensation taking over her entire face, and she would even say that because she was wearing contacts at the time, the power of this battery acid would melt these contacts into her eyes, and so she could no longer see. Nafia would say in an interview later that whoever was behind this, she firmly believes, knows her and intentionally targeted her. As far as interviews go, here's the most recent one of her. This is several years following that 2021 attack, and then even years after this, in 2024, this year, the healing process was very difficult for Nafia. She couldn't eat well, she could not see. She's just now, years after, updating everyone saying that she can finally kind of blurrily make out how many fingers her relatives are holding up when they, try to test that with her vision. But ultimately, she says she does not want to give any more power to her attackers than they already have for what they've done to her. And so she doesn't hold anger towards them because to this day, her attackers have not been caught. There have been no arrests made. Nafia is only focused on emotionally and spiritually and physically healing.